Hey everyone, welcome back. So today we're going to take a deep dive into some potential supply chain issues.
Yeah. Sounds good.
That might be coming up in early 2025.
Right.
And we're basing all this on a recent CNBC article.
Okay, cool.
That it highlights two main factors
that
could really cause some problems.
Right.
One is President-elect Trump's expected new tariffs.
Okay.
And the other is a possible strike at a bunch of ports along the East Coast and the Gulf Coast.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So why don't we jump in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So the interesting thing is that businesses aren't waiting around to see what happens.
Yeah, that's right.
They're already trying to figure out how to deal with all this uncertainty.
Yeah, and they're already making moves, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. Like honor-lane shipping.
Okay.
They're already advising their clients to think about front-loading their freight.
Huh?
Like starting in December.
Wow. So like right away, basically.
Yeah, like right away.
Wow, that's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to get ahead of this huge potential logjam.
Yeah, they're trying to beat the rush, I guess.
Yeah, right.
To try to avoid all the problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, let's break this down a little more.
Okay.
Let's talk about these two factors, starting with the tariffs.
Okay. I get that tariffs are taxes on imports.
All right.
But what makes these new tariffs different?
Okay, so first of all, we could be looking at an increase of like 60 to 100%
Wow.
on imports from China.
Wow.
Think about all the stuff we get from China.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff.
Electronics, clothes, all kinds of things.
Yeah, for sure.
These tariffs could really make a difference in how much you spend.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
And it's not just China.
Oh, really?
There could be a 10 to 20% increase on imports from every other country, too.
Wow.
And it's these things called ad valorem tariffs.
Ad valorem.
Which means they're a percentage of the value of the goods.
Oh, okay.
So the pricier the item, the higher the tax.
So basically everything we buy could get more expensive.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so tariffs are one problem. But what about this potential strike at the ports? What's going on with that?
So it's the International Longshoremen's Association, or ILA.
ILA.
And they're in negotiations with the USMX.
Okay.
That's the United States Maritime Alliance.
Got it. And what are they disagreeing about?
Mostly automation.
Automation.
The USMX wants more automation at the ports.
Okay.
But the ILA sees that as a threat to their jobs.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They actually already went on strike briefly last month.
Oh, right. Yeah.
The deadline for a new agreement is January 15th, 2025.
Okay.
And if they don't reach a deal, we could see a strike that shuts down ports from Maine all the way to Texas.
Oh, wow.
Like a ton of the country's ports.
Yeah, that's a huge part of the country.
Remember that 3-day strike in October?
Oh, yeah.
The backlog of ships waiting to unload was crazy.
It was wild.
It took weeks for things to get back to normal.
I can't even imagine if it was longer than 3 days.
If there's a long strike, it could be a total disaster. Major shipment delays, shortages of all sorts of goods.
Oh, no.
And even more price increases.
Okay, so we have tariffs that could make everything more expensive.
Yep.
And we have a possible strike that could really mess up the flow of goods.
Right.
This is like a double whammy for the supply chain.
It is a double whammy.
So China is a big part of this.
Right.
But the global supply chain is way more complicated than just China.
Yeah, it's like a giant web.
Yeah, you touch one part and the whole thing shakes.
Exactly.
It's crazy to think about.
We rely on so many countries for imports.
Yeah.
Like C.H. Robinson said, we've been relying more and more on places like South Korea, Vietnam, and Malaysia.
Okay, so it's not just about China anymore.
Nope.
Okay, so how are businesses supposed to plan for all of this?
Some are doing this stockpile now, worry later thing.
What do you mean?
Like those doomsday preppers.
Oh, whatever.
But for companies,
Right.
Everstream Analytics,
Okay.
they do supply chain risk management. And they say businesses are increasing their inventory levels.
To get ready for the potential problems.
Exactly.
But wouldn't that just lead to higher warehousing costs?
Yeah.
And what if all that extra stuff becomes outdated?
That's the risks they're taking.
So what other strategies are businesses looking at?
That's what we'll talk about next.
Okay, cool. I'm ready for part 2.
Let's do it.
All right, everyone, stay tuned for part 2, where we'll explore some alternative solutions.
Sounds good.
And see how this might all play out in the long run.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, so we were talking about companies trying to figure out how to handle these tariffs and the potential strike.
Right.
And you mentioned there might be other ways they're dealing with this besides stockpiling.
Yeah, well, one really interesting thing is happening with Mexico.
Oh, yeah, Mexico. What about it?
So the USMCA trade deal?
Right.
Well, a lot of Chinese companies have actually started setting up factories in Mexico.
Really?
Yeah, and that lets them take advantage of the USMCA.
To avoid the tariffs.
Exactly. They can bypass those big tariffs we were talking about.
That's what's smart.
Yeah, it's like a backdoor into the U.S. market.
Right. So they're getting around the tariffs by making stuff in Mexico.
Exactly. But here's where it gets tricky.
Okay.
President-elect Trump has said he might change the USMCA.
Oh, wow.
So even if companies move production to Mexico, it might not work long term.
So there's really no guarantee.
It's a tough situation.
Yeah, for sure.
And remember what C.H. Robinson said about companies diversifying?
Yeah, spreading the risk.
Right. They're also setting up in places like South Korea, Vietnam, Malaysia.
So they're not putting all their eggs in one basket.
Exactly. But those countries could also be affected by new tariffs.
Right. It seems like there's no easy answer.
It's really uncertain right now, which makes it hard for businesses to plan.
Okay, so what's the long-term outlook?
Well, that's the big question.
Are we going to see global supply chains completely change?
It's possible, AlixPartners.
They're the consulting firm.
Right. They think there could be a big short-term spike in freight rates.
Why is that?
They think businesses will rush to import goods before any new tariffs start.
Makes sense.
And that would push up shipping costs because of the high demand.
So it's like a last-minute scramble for plane tickets.
Exactly.
So basically, things are going to get even more expensive to ship, at least for a while.
In the short term, yeah. But after that initial rush, it's hard to say.
So what do they think will happen after that?
Well, AlixPartners thinks the high tariffs might actually discourage imports in the long run.
Oh, okay.
So if it gets too expensive to bring goods in, then shipping volumes might go down.
Okay.
And that could lead to lower freight rates later on.
So a busy period followed by things calming down.
Maybe, but S&P Global Market Intelligence,
Okay.
they have a different take.
Oh, really?
They think all of this, the tariffs, the potential strike, the changes in manufacturing,
Yeah.
they think it could lead to a major restructuring of global supply chains.
Wow. So more than just a few temporary problems.
Potentially a complete change in the way things work. It's like we're at a crossroads with different paths ahead.
And which path we take depends on the decisions that are made in the coming months.
Exactly. The decisions made by businesses and governments will determine the outcome.
So how will all of this affect the average person?
Well, think about those price increases you've been seeing at the grocery store.
Yeah, those are already got enough.
These tariffs could make things even worse.
Oh, no.
Imagine paying more for clothes, electronics, your car even.
Yeah.
It could really change how much you can buy and how you spend your money.
And a port strike would just add to that, wouldn't it?
Exactly. More delays, more shortages, even higher prices.
It's like a domino effect.
Yeah, it is. Remember those supply chain issues during the pandemic?
Oh, yeah.
Empty shelves, long waits for products?
It was rough.
A port strike could cause similar problems.
So with the tariffs, the potential strike, and companies trying to figure everything out, what are the key takeaways?
The biggest takeaway is that there's a lot of uncertainty and potential for things to change quickly in the global supply chain.
It sounds like things are pretty unpredictable right now.
The decisions made by governments and businesses and what happens with those labor negotiations,
Right.
it's all going to have a ripple effect that affects everyone.
So it's important to stay informed.
Absolutely. Pay attention to news about trade policies, labor developments, and anything companies say about potential price increases or supply disruptions.
So knowing what's going on is really important.
Knowledge is power, especially when things are changing so fast.
Any final thoughts? What's the one big thing you want our listener to remember?
This isn't just about getting through a rough patch.
Okay.
This could completely change how global supply chains work in the future.
So it's not just about short-term issues.
It's about a potential fundamental shift in how goods are made, transported, and consumed.
Wow.
And that shift will impact every part of our lives.
So it's not just about riding out the storm.
It's about adapting to a whole new reality.
And the decisions made in the next few months will decide what that new reality looks like. Okay, so we've covered tariffs, potential strike, even that Mexico thing. It's a lot.
It is a lot to think about.
If you had to sum it up, what's the most important thing for people to understand about how this might affect them personally?
Well, it's easy to get lost in all the details, but the bottom line is the choices made in the next few months will affect every part of our lives.
Okay.
We could see prices go up on everything from food to electronics.
Right.
There might be shortages of certain things and even longer shipping times.
Yeah, it's like that saying, when the U.S. sneezes, the world catches a cold.
Right.
But this time it feels more like the U.S. might have a really bad flu.
That's a good way to put it. The global supply chain is so connected that any disruption here in the U.S.,
Yeah.
it affects the whole system, and those effects hit people's wallets.
So what can people do? Is there anything they can do to prepare for all of this?
Definitely knowledge is power, right?
Right.
Staying informed about trade policies, labor negotiations, company announcements,
Okay.
that can give you a real advantage.
Like you could know about price hikes or shortages before they happen.
Exactly. You could adjust your spending habits, stock up on essentials, maybe even find different places to buy things.
That's a good point. Maybe it's time to start thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
Any other advice before we wrap things up?
I'd say be flexible and be ready to adapt. This isn't just temporary.
Yeah.
It could be a whole new reality, and the old ways of doing things might not work anymore.
So people who can adapt quickly will have an easier time.
Exactly.
So stay informed, be adaptable, and maybe stock up on some extra coffee just in case.
It sounds like a good plan to me.
All right, everyone. That's our deep dive into the potential double trouble brewing in the supply chain.
It is a good one.
We talked about the tariffs, the possibility of a big strike at the ports, and how companies are trying to adapt.
Yep.
But the real takeaway here is that this isn't just about economics. It's about how interconnected the world is.
That's right.
Decisions made in offices and factories far away can affect your life.
And understanding those connections is more important than ever.
So keep learning, keep exploring, and stay curious because the future of global trade is happening right now. It's going to affect all of us. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.